Welcome to the John Cady podcast. I'm John Cady, U.S. Navy retired, former minister. And as I follow the news over the last few days concerning ICE and the ICE raids across the country, I received a news report today over in the state of Maryland. They have now introduced in the General Assembly a bill that would mandate, if passed and signed into law by Governor Wes Moore, that ICE agents performing their duties would be required under state statute to remove their masks. The whole masking issue of ICE agents wouldn't even be an issue of discussion if agents weren't being doxxed for performing their duties. What does that mean, being doxxed? We'll start with that. Being doxxed means that all your personal information, where you live, who your family is, your personal phone number, where you work, is suddenly posted on the public square for everybody to see. That poses not only privacy concerns, but it's also a major safety concern. What Maryland lawmakers are proposing, well, we have bills targeting masks on law enforcement. Maryland legislators are considering proposals that would prohibit law enforcement officers, including ICE agents, from wearing face masks or other identity-hiding gear while carrying out duties in the state. These bills are part of a suite of immigration-related measures debated in the General Assembly this session. Digital Unmasking Initiative, a Maryland Democratic lawmaker, has proposed legislation aimed at digitally unmasking ICE agents in certain cases, meaning there would be a process for courts to require preservation and disclosure of digital data like GPS, phone info, surveillance images, etc., that could identify ICE officers accused of violent or unconstitutional actions. This is pitched as a way to enable accountability while not forcing agents to remove physical protective gear in every situation. Why is this a hot topic? It's become politically charged for a few reasons. One is safety versus accountability. Federal authorities say face coverings are used to protect officers from being doxxed, having their personal identities made public, and from real threats, including a reported surge in threats, assaults, and attacks against immigration agents. Critics argue that broad masking without clear identification can increase public fear, reduce transparency, and undermine public trust. Precedents in other states. There's already in a law in the state of California banning federal agents from wearing face masks during enforcement operations except in what they call narrowly defined situations such as undercover work or environmental hazards. That law is now being challenged in court by the federal government on constitutional grounds, citing the Constitution's supremacy clause. In Maryland, the masking proposals are part of a broader legislative push that includes banning local participation in federal immigration enforcement agreements and limiting ICE agents' cooperation with local law enforcement. Immigration law in the state of Maryland is nothing new. When I lived in Maryland from 2005 to 2020, even then, there were always issues about Maryland being a sanctuary state, places like Baltimore and Prince George's County being considered as sanctuary jurisdictions, where if you were an illegal alien in those communities, they couldn't just come in and take you away. Now, why does this all matter? Well, the point about doxing is directly connected to the debate. Supporters of masking argue that they're necessary for ICE agent safety given increased violence and threats. The counter from critics is that when agents are unidentifiable in the field, ordinary people have no way of knowing who they're interacting with, which can heighten fear and mistrust, especially in the context of controversial raids and violent encounters that have drawn widespread attention. It's also important to note that state laws regulating federal agents' conduct, like mask bans, can raise serious legal questions due to the Constitution's supremacy clause, which generally prevents states from directly dictating how a federal government, or federal enforcement, I should say, operates. That legal tension is already playing out in other states. Another question gets brought up. If mask bans are implemented, this could result in voluntary attrition, as agents may decide their own safety and that of their families is more important than their jobs. I totally agree with that. That concern is not speculative or fringe. It's a well understood dynamic in law enforcement and national security, and it applies especially to immigration enforcement right now. How can a mask ban realistically translate into voluntary attrition, even without saying that's the intent? The mask bans changed the risk calculus for agents, not just the optics. For ICE agents, masking isn't about anonymity in the abstract, it's about risk transfer. When that agent's face is visible, the risk doesn't end when the shift ends, especially if it's a viral incident that gets broadcast all over TikTok, all over Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. Or it's in a politically charged protest that also goes viral. It also extends to spouses and children, home addresses, schools, churches, places of employment being targeted. Long-term digital permanence. Screenshots don't expire. Remember what our parents told us or what we told our kids? Whatever goes on the internet stays on the internet. It never completely goes away. And once agents believe the institution cannot or will not protect them beyond that badge, attrition becomes rational, not ideological. They're going to say to themselves, this just isn't worth the risk. Why should I go out here and put my butt on the line if my family and my personal life aren't protected? From an agent's perspective concerning doxing, criminal prosecution of doxers is rare. It most certainly is. I don't even know of any cases where somebody has been prosecuted for doxing. Platform moderation is inconsistent and slow. After all, we complain all the time about the big tech companies and their platforms right now, and nothing has changed. Once the information is out, it can't be recalled. This goes back to the old phrase, you can't put the cat in the bag once it's out. Threats often stay just below prosecutable thresholds. The people who are doing the doxing and putting all this information out there know their limits. Just like some people who are good at committing fraud and embezzlement, they know the legal threshold, and as long as they don't cross that threshold, they know that the law's not going to touch them. And the same thing applies here. So when a state mandates unmasking while not simultaneously guaranteeing rapid, aggressive protection for agents and families, it creates an asymmetric vulnerability. The agent bears permanent personal risk, the state bears little immediate cost. That asymmetry is a classic driver of voluntary exits. Now, why would this attrition be voluntary, not dramatic or public? You're not going to see a massive walk-off or your press conferences. What's going to happen is, over time, you're going to see more early retirements, more agents transferring to less visible federal roles. Agents are going to decline assignments in certain states. Difficulty recruiting experienced personnel. If you know young people today, and if they know that they're going to risk getting exposed to the public eye by working for immigration enforcement, they're not going to want the job. But it creates the other problem that ICE will be forced to rely on newer, less seasoned agents. This kind of attrition is quiet but cumulative, and by the time it shows up in operational failures, it's already entrenched. Family safety. What often gets missed in the public debate is this: agents don't quit because of criticism, they quit when their families are exposed. Agents will tolerate getting yelled at, getting filmed, being accused publicly, but if their children are being named online, if a spouse is being harassed at his or her place of work, a home address is posted alongside a photo, then the agent's going to decide at that point, well, I've had enough. I'm cutting my losses. I'm going to find a different line of work, or I'm going to put in for a transfer, because at that point, staying becomes a family decision, not a career one. The unintended consequence is going to be fewer experienced agents, not fewer raids. Ironically, if the policy goal is more restraint or professionalism, attrition may push outcomes the opposite direction. Loss of experienced agents is going to mean less de-escalation skill, poor judgment under stress. Look what happened in Minneapolis. More rigid rule following instead of discretion, higher likelihood of mistakes. The veterans are going to be the first to leave. The new agents are going to be what's left, and they're not going to necessarily know what to do. And that's a pattern seen repeatedly across law enforcement environments when morale and perceived institutional backing erode. And the constitutional tension, that's going to make it even worse. Because federal agents know state mandates may be challenged or overturned, political leadership may shift, and protections may be temporary. Uncertainty itself is going to accelerate the exits too. The bottom line, mask bans don't just increase accountability, they externalize risk onto individual agents and their families. And when that risk crosses the personal threshold, voluntary attrition is a rational, predictable response, and the result is not going to be moral clarity or safety. It's operational degradation and polarization. It's a two-edged sword, folks. If the agents feel that in any way, shape, or form that they're not going to be safe and that their personal information is going to be exposed just because they're performing the job that they've been tasked with doing, they're going to leave. They're going to find someplace else where they'll feel safe and their families will feel safe. This is John Cady. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. It's a little long, but there was a lot to unpack here. And if you like this content, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'm looking forward to you on the next one.